together.
This meeting is being recorded. The Alt F4. This got it up. Zoom meeting.
Please put your hands
System
together
menu.
to welcome Jean.
Thanks very much, Jack. And thanks for the, as always, kind and enthusiastic introduction. And thank you to those of you who've stuck it out, waiting for the Zoom to start. It's an honor for me to read at Wheelbarrow. And I read a few years ago, and at that time I brought all new poems. This time I've brought mostly old poems, mostly ones I've managed to find a home for to publish. But I've tried to put in a few newer ones as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and read, and I'm pretty sure I've got more than we'll get through this evening. So someone wave a hand at me when it gets to when shall I read until?
So usually people read for between half an hour and 45 minutes, but my watch is broken, so
Okay.
It's broken, Jean.
don't worry too much about it.
All right.
That's
Well,
that's the guideline. That's the sort of rule of thumb.
Right, I'll go ahead. So I haven't written many poems. Normally I write poems all the time. In the last year or so, I haven't written many, mostly because I've been trying my hand at other genres with limited satisfaction, shall we say. I don't know if success, if you can say it's success, but this poem is about that. So this poem is called Why It Hasn't Happened Yet. I want to write a book someday. It must be like the sea, always new. It must contain fossil shark's teeth and a mirror. It must take place over tea, be about companionship and different, surprising as tomorrow's clouds, old as the sun. It must walk on South Africa's beaches and into her houses. It must see what the seagull sees. It must not blow away into a fence and flap there in the wind. It must not build up in landfills or lie in a corner unopened. It must be read in a world where there is space for reading. It must not be a 3-minute Google search. It must have no advertising. It must be like a shoe sewn by hand. It must say something between the bang and the apocalypse. It cannot use the words everybody uses. It must enter my grand's kitchen. It must also see the beggar and the addict, and it cannot contain religion, but truth. I will write it as I have written all the others. It will flow from my pen that hangs in the flow of everything, the eddies of the sky, the wanting, the clamor of bad news and social media, the structures of consumer middle class, the boundarylessness of poverty and politicians, the selfishness of crime and capitalism. It could contain pages of dates and data, drawings, or questions such as where were you when, and do you believe our children will inherit the earth too? And to do all that, I must believe in all this publishing and history, and in a you who sometime, somewhere, believes me when I say, I will write a book someday. So I imagine many can identify with those sentiments. This one is one that's been around for a while. I thought I'd start with some poems that are more about poetry and the craft of poetry. And this one is called Definitions. And it's about words, and it might be difficult to listen to. Some of you have heard it a few times before, but I've tried to use the words almost to paint. So here we go. So they're not. I'm not necessarily using the words with in their usual sense, but for their sound and their association. Definitions. Picture alone. Here, a dark patch of moist morbidity, turbidity, glut, gloaming, freshened with a liquid heart, heat, glistening felicity, broken by actuality, eccentric geometric building block rock coincidence. Pick up a fragment like dry leaves in bric-a-brac, cotton neck, tenderly chick-housed somehow, soon to be almost a shoot of a tree, existent, ripe, swelling. It is growing in the dark, soon running roots down, sustained by rich impact, extract, beautiful cataract, growing, glowing, encroaching, approaching, ing. It is a seed, living, leaving, opening for something, for sun, stretching, vital, powerful, energy, combustion, sun, star, explosion. When it unleaves, what will it be? A leaf, cone, grief, brief. It is a tree. Is it crusting up from curl, chuck, and swirl? So much chaos, albatross, dross, dripping upwards a tree. That's a tall trunk, axe, a wall, rough leather, hall, overhead motion, just a profusion, insanity, delusion, light green confabulation, elation, to toe down here below, snail, grass, catharsis. However you dress it, I raise against it. Thank you with lunch and be glad shaked. This one I wrote after Robert Frost, and it's called Inner Weather. And it's the one that I sent out with the email. And it's, Robert Frost in his poem, Tree at My Window, he sort of hints at inner weather and is very restrained. In this poem, I decided to not be restrained and just tell all the weather. So this is inner weather. It has rained here, something like Noah, though here the world has carried on, married, birthed, died in turn. It has rained here. And first I stayed indoors in pajamas, made tea, called a friend on the phone and watched how leaves blew up and stayed splayed on the glass. And then, when no blue would show, I went walking in my waterproofs and felt how it wet my face till I was a conduit of the sky and my socks soaked. And then it was cold and it blew, and it felt as though I flew or was flown, flung down, caught up, clung. I have been a rag on razor wire that flicks, flicks and spits sparks, shorting above red beams that cut at night across a garden. I have had the moon and the orange of highway lights against wet tar, the blindness of the headlights of a passing car, until I no longer love the books on my shelves. At last, I waded out to sea. I couldn't wait longer. I couldn't know if there would be a home beam. I was a ship and a sail and a wind, and I flew fast over the fit spray, and there was dawn, dawn peaching without horizon. Now I am a beach, strewn with white wood, chill in the morning, and odd bits from the deep and from continents cast up together, still, and not yet used to the feel of your footfall. This one is after not understanding John Ashbery, and in his poem, The Painter, John Ashbery's poetry is very evocative, but sort of purposely obtuse a bit. In his poem, The Painter, it finishes with, finally, all indications of the subject began to fade, leaving the canvas perfectly white. So I took up from there and I said, that white canvas, if we found the poet making tea afterwards, he might be pondering the suds, hands wet about the plug hole, or gazing over tiny leaf pot plants living and dying on the kitchen sill, at the distant ocean over pine tops. Offered a penny, an honorarium, could he? I mean, what would he? Let's go and look at the sea, we might suggest, and go together to the sand. It comes and goes, but never entirely withdraws. We take salt home on our skins. What is this edge a man feels in a sharp line against canvas, but cannot, and then buries part of it in the sand, while a girl watches, dripping ice cream melting in the sun, her plait like a paintbrush behind her back. He does not see that, not even on the back of the canvas. He thinks, sun. Does he feel her wondering about him? Meanwhile, she has turned to watch a ship pass a lighthouse and gulls, but he paints her cheek, squinting into his light. If he grabbed her and ran her laughing to the breakers, the picture would become for a while blue about them, foamy and cold, and afterwards stories, two central, and the man and his wife with their dog, Also the volleyball team, incidentally crossing the heart as a painter watches the ocean. Imagine if we found a white canvas cast up on the beach. And this one is my own love letter to the beach. My feet remember picking brittle over half-dry seaweed, plastered over rocks raspy with barnacles, and the aching cold of an Atlantic rock pool frosted with foam, over a trove of recalcitrant clipfices, sea urchins, finger-sucking anemones, smooth, sharp sequins of mussels, tufts of green that frill out when the cold salt lifts their petticoats, and occasionally an octopus in the shallows, mysterious pockets of warm and cushion stars. Or on other days, warm apart from the gale, great sandy breakers spitting off spray at our faces, stuffing seaweed and bits of stingy jellyfish into the corners of us under our cozies, making us jump and shout at the chill, and taking us churning on chestfuls of foam to the shallows to lurch back out again for more, please. Except sometimes the swell smooths over the whole bay, some glorious baking day, when the breeze lifts the birds very high, and the felt shimmers and sings, the dune grass barely stirs, and we duck under the deep and rise and sink slowly, undulating alongside waves of other smiling heads and floating feet. Or swimming to the buoy, out deep into kayak territory, merging with the surge like a seal, I bite a snorkel, am rewarded by a bitter perished rubber taste and the occasional lungful of sea, and immersion below, where light lasts only as far as several million grains of sea dust, and down there in the murk, forests of kelp where no breadcrumbs trail. This poem is a collection of moments. It's called London Season. Room was dirty, had to vacuum and wash walls, thick black fuzz from the trains. Oh God, it's raining, someone just said out in the street, a kind of spaciousness to their voice and the sound of rain. Tuesday, framed fluorescent light on blue, a woman slipping away, overwhelmed by tears, alone on the morning tube. 3 stags in Richmond Park, just heads and felty antlers over the grass. Tom, who takes the tour, talks like he's drunk, slowly, on purpose to make you laugh. Yellow leaves on the pavement and rain, the tense sound of a lone umbrella. Things start making sense from this point outwards. The fireworks in Fishhook, the summer I was 15, were not as flash as these, but we lay on our backs in the school field in the dark, laughing, and the sparks fell as though they burned into our hearts. This one is called Home Away From, and it's a poem about, I suppose, about homesickness and being in London. And it's in 3 languages, and only one of them is my home language, so forgive me if I have to be brave to read it, but I'm going to read it. Home Away From. Baya pambili paye ka palitringa kodwa. I think they're getting on in Cape Town, but I won't say it to the man in the South African shop. The huge skulklodens, daai bene wat net vaalkose en veldspoons kort. The young Johannes Kerkorrel selling Oma and Mrs. Balls and biltong and boerewors in a shop wat net kort those tin cups enameled and steel garden spades, rakes, gumboots, big sacks of mielie meal. No, wait, daar staan die wiese, daar. Gloomy as ever a klein Karoo padstal inside. Ryk so stof en beskuit en biltong. Kort net die klein Karoo. Daai skierblink somerson, kort net die Swartberg. En die tannies wat hertsogies en cooksisters pak. No shortage of pithy advice though. It's not easy, hey. Do yourself a favor, hang around a few more years. You'll make money, and South Africa is going. He whistles and his hand nosedives behind the counter. But I won't keep you talking. It's just going to make you depressed. Where are you from? He means Earlsfield. Crystal Palace is almost like Cape Town. There's a big forest right there and a massive big park and a sports field. And just close by there, it's like obs. So there's a bit of culture too. Lekker. But it's tough, hey? Come anytime you want to talk. Doesn't have to be serious. Paya Zama, Paya Kapa, at least. At least they're trying in Cape Town. Nothing is what it was. This is for every relationship that ends and is about love that comes and goes and comes again, and for the beloved lost and far away, and for wondering what could have been done differently. This is for heartache and tears, for tearing up what is in hope of better. This is for every heart that could no longer hold what it had and what it hoped for together. This is for the unmistakable knowing of finding home and for the unfathomable loneliness of wandering. This is for having hoped for too little and grown out of that, or for too much, but you can never hope for too much. This is for indecision, for hanging on, for dread. This is for regret, for love times and objects and dreams undone. It is for those words when they finally come, and the real silent end of the line and the hurt that follows. It is for offering an explanation again, and for asking one more time if it must be, really is. This is for wanting love from stone, from an unanswering phone, for being alone. This is for throwing everything into the ocean, for the love of the music and the moment, and the garden that must be cut down to stumps and burned before springtime. And this is for finding that nothing, for long seasons, winters, droughts, journeys, a siege, is what it was, nor will you be who you were again. I ought to say that most of these have been published either in stanzas. Some of them are in the McGregor anthologies, and many are on the AVBOB site. So if anyone wants to find them, I've got a list on my blog. You can go and see which ones are where. Wraparound poem. This poem is to wrap around, vague and gentle, a little tickly, soft, what you want on a day when the ground and everyone is hard, also the weather, and you know you will have to wait a bit until the feeling comes back, like a pricking in the corner of your eyes. This is where you are now. Have a poem, have time. It matters, it matters. You can care, do care, it matters. Here, not out there, not global anything, but now. The color and the spread of the hairs on your forearm, and these eyes, the quality of your vision, the resistance in the lids, the slow slide over cornea, your ears, and what they have heard, and also the strange way the breastbone and the ribs and the diaphragm together can hurt for themselves, by themselves especially. Mind, never mind, no, do mind. This poem is a breeze on a hot day through a leafy window. This poem is not looking now, but it is there, and it knows, and it is waiting. People who love dogs. Golden Labradors whose whole frame says hopefulness. Big, wet-faced dogs with sad eyebrows. Sausage dogs who sleep in blankets. Floor-mop dogs who smell of pee. Gray-furred dogs with creaks and bad breath. Touchy Dobermans with pointy ears. Long-haired dogs who follow toddlers and shed in drifts and thatches, poodles, and people who accommodate a cat have inside them something big and curiously impractical. John Williams joined me on a bench on the South Side Common, looking at the pond in its afternoon glory, thinking of getting up to go at last. People with dogs and children out for the sunshine, and the heron. I told him about the heron. It seemed far too strange to sit there silent together, and too rude to leave. He said they shelter there in the bushes, and we talked in fits and starts, starting slowly. The common is a blessing, he said. It's hard for some people to get through the week. He's in a care home on Clifton Road, 2 broken legs, shaggy, coat and scarf up to his chin, bamboo cane. A woman across the pond was throwing a stick nearly 2 meters long for her Labrador into the water. The pond is very low, he said, precious little rain in months. He's worked all over the world, an engineer. Mozambique, the North, Laos, Nairobi, India, I think he said, Malaysia, Australia. He named them slowly, one at a time, not counting on my interest. The whole world is out there, he said. In Australia, they're a lazy lot, but if you wanted to, you could do something there. And Africa. In Africa, you can make a difference to people's lives. I mustn't waste my training. I owe it to God if I'm a Christian and society to do something with it. I mentioned love, but he had no ears for that. Just go, he said. Don't stay here where there are so many people. Go. Go back to Cape Town even. What are your plans? Just make it work. Don't listen to me, he said, looking me in the eye for the first time. What would you do if you were me, if you were 32? I wanted him to see me, that I was distinct, my own. I would go, he said. I would go to Australia. That was my mistake. I should have stayed there. There were other factors, though. In this country, you're lucky if someone will say hello. I thought I ought to go at last with my ship full of advice, though later I looked for him again on the common. You can do anything, go anywhere, he had said, and I had repeated a phrase I'd heard somewhere. But you can only do one thing at a time, I said. Istanbul Ataturk Airport, peopled by the laid-over world, comrades in transit in any language, counting our hours, sleeping in the walkway outside the mesquite prayer room, where men wearing white towels talk loudly, and beautiful, serene women say patient things, I presume, and there is a pilgrim feeling, a preaching in public and an avid listening with black sandals, all awake together for far too many hours, enough to notice the polishing passage of feet through Hagia Sophia, the glacial bending of marble, plus one Viking's persistent signature, like Thutmose's 3,500-year-old prayer, just as clear-cut as fresh. I want to conquer Mesopotamia, or to be lord of my own 2 seats outside gate 212, enough to lie down beside a peaceful neighbor, and whether or not my prayer withstands the weather, to have moved, to have gone on. This one, I'm wondering, this one is in here to remind me that I have a blog that I ought to get back to working on. And on that blog, I had been reading some South African poetry and responding. And this one is a longish one by Charles-Pierre Naudier. I think I'm going to read it anyway, though, and then my response. And I'm afraid I'm going to read the English translation because I'm not confident enough in my Afrikaans to read the original. But Mosquito Nets of Neptune. The translation is by Dominique Enthoven-Botha. This is by Charles-Pierre Naudier. Mosquito Nets of Neptune. A breeze flows across the seaside town, and a crash in the northwest herds the grazing clouds. Unobtrusively, the messages announce themselves, auguring an imminent erasure. At first, only sound, distant murmuring wind, and the anxious clangor of birds at a bar, the clink-clink of metal, a bicycle bell in a courtyard caressed by the breeze, moaning softly, like a baby's rattle in a sheltering bosom. Suddenly, the sun is gone. All color pales. The wind flows into a darker mood, flings a basket of splodges stripped from the berry tree against the ancient stained wall. And the old hound goes to ground, meek, muzzle prostrate like a mantis. Then sudden rain in flushed out squalls, flagellating the flesh like burdocks. And the orchestra is there too, that sleeps in things, subatomic and encompassing. Kinetically quickened little Fankarians awaken like babushkas in the miniature spaceships of the fulminating acorns, and with a thunderclap, a piano falls from a tree, scattered slatting everywhere. It is raining. So hard to describe rain, because rain is transient, because it is transparent, perhaps both, but I can try. The salvaging of memories. The following stays with me. How I stood on the rim of a valley that used to be a reservoir, since run dry, and hardly visible far down below is the piled stone of what once was a homestead, and the clear outline of the perimeter wall, and stones mortared into the opposite slope say, God bless. One can try. Rain shall flap around us tonight like Neptune's mosquito nets in the currents of oblivion. A grand narrative of people and gods shall perish because the tides are ripping it to shreds, and summer has hardly begun. In chaos there is creation and recreation in luminous chaos. Rain lashes the ground right in front of her, on the stoop of the old age home, Aunt Min from the farm that no longer exists, who occasionally sees flying saucers in the late afternoon, when time and timelessness drop as one from the hand of the Lord. 3 wash basins painted with ducks come clanging past down the street, lifted from a garden and chased out mercilessly by the music of the spheres. So that one is quite a poem. I suspect I responded not to all, but to part of it, but here's my response. We have the wind. Somewhere a tropical storm is coming. In Cape Town, we have the wind. The sky moving en masse, grazing the ground, ripping clouds in and out of existence, breaking against the mountains, chasing even the kite surfers one by one in from the waves, blurring the boundary between sea and sand as both blow into your face. If you were taking a windy walk, the only one on the shore, tasting salt spray and hearing the wind roar so that you can shout or sing and nobody will hear. Stealing the zincs from shacks and battering bins together in the neighbor flats, covering over even the plastic that will wash up again tomorrow with sand. Sand steaming along the road like the aurora borealis, blasting the cars in no particular pattern, parked eating sandy chips with bright red tomato sauce and ignoring the gulls clinging to the railing. I remember mainly sensations. Standing in the street, leaning into the cold support coming from the sea, having the breath taken from my face and trailed behind, managing a skirt and 2 bags and a hockey stick, rounding a corner in the gale, staying indoors, reading every afternoon all summer holidays. Somehow, it has come out that we have a sheltered garden where my small son watches, enthralled by the magical streams of sprinkler spray moving to and fro over the yard, where all my works, every evening, observed by barbets, resurrecting the grass. This one is Rain at Home. When it rains at night, I remember about praying. The square of this room is so audibly safe, while outside the water cycle is happening near the sea over the mountainside, with wind running, and I can somehow smell the damp earth, what it's like to be a small, wet, earthy thing, a sprig of erica leaf, a beetle when a meniscus might not let it out again, the wet availability of a summer downpour. Somehow I can feel the wideness of the world under it, puddles appearing, making places of every indentation, and musical drips and gullies, the windows and the walls. The wind first made a poet of me, this room in the rain. I put the lights off and had the dimness of things with the door closed, the awareness of being, and my eyes receiving signal, how the irises open, bluer in the last light, and before you know it, God. The road afterwards emerges, a long, slick spraying strip for tires, and I can almost feel a wet beach underfoot, twiggy stormwater wood, lawns with wet cut grass to keep your feet remembering. I think I'll do maybe 1, maybe 2 more. I'm going to do now where are they? Right at the end, I guess. Butterfly Slope. I don't want to write anything hard now, not go near the edge that is always there, where the wind blows the butterflies off into the void. Though I told my son, after someone dies, they go to be with God, we hope. We hope like people who heard there was hope and that there wasn't. It's not the dying, really. That will be work to do. No, it is the living, knowing. It is wanting what was and what never was. It is not being who I thought, not having and having what I hoped. It is remembering the ponderous earth, the taste of green, flitting from bush to bush in the breeze in the dry summer on a slope above the great ocean, pressing my tongue into every flower. And I'll finish with this last one, this sunrise. An abundance of sky. That should be the last line, except for the way it stretches, reminding us how the earth turns fast, how the mountains form more slowly and slowly erode, reminding us of water, of weather, of global warming. Clouds in 3D only dreamed of, except by birds. In dreams, I can fly like a swimmer, gently rising. But even in sleep, I have never been so high as the sunrise, so far as the horizon. Though, of course, in life you can do it, when there is no travel ban. Sleepwalk around the curve 10,000 kilometers to a city that keeps the sky only in its open places and between the shoulders of tall buildings, and become enthralled by history, by place. This place has an abundance of sky. So, I see that's been half an hour, so I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Jean. Wow. Jacques, sorry, were you going to?
I was gonna say, yeah, but I was going to say something, but I went a bit gaga, so that happens to me sometimes. It was just the most incredible reading. Thank you. And there's just an abundance of life in your poems, and it's it's a joy. It's literally a joyous to hear them. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacques. And thank you, everybody. It's a joy to read, and it's a joy to share them. So thanks for listening.
Hey, Jean, it was a real pleasure. We usually have a Q&A at the end of the reading. I don't know if you or people can make comments or observations. I'm not sure if that sits well with you, but
that's fine.
Okay. Okay, Jacques already has his hand up, but I just wanted to say a couple of things. I love the way you play with language and words. There's a playfulness that is there in a lot of the poems, and I particularly like the poems about the sea and water and weather. Very moving, very evocative, and yeah, I imagine if you had a collection, quite a few of those would be in there because they are just gorgeous poems. Yeah, I'm going gaga. so, yeah, yeah. Thank you
There's
so
having
much.
a collection, and then there's finding anyone to publish it.
Sure.
Those are two different things.
Yeah, but the poems are
But
nuanced
thank you.
and evocative and vivid, especially the ones about water. Yeah, so
Thank you.
I'm sure there are things that I haven't heard tonight. But I'll hand over to Jacques. Yeah, Jacques, you have a question? Your hand is
Jacques, you've just muted yourself, I think.
I always lose track. I'm always struck, Jean, by the way your poems don't shy away from difficult subjects, but there's so much joy in them. Sometimes I feel that joy is utterly spontaneous, and sometimes I think there's also something deliberate about it, that you choose, that you, as if you open yourself up to the possibility of, you know, of joy, of new things happening, or things being surprising and yet old as the sun. I wonder, is that, does that come naturally? Does that quality? It's a very enviable, it's a wonderful quality to encounter in somebody's poems. Is it something that comes naturally to you?
I think my poetry tends to start in a feeling or an atmosphere a lot of the time.
Mm.
And I think, you know, if one's going to open one's eyes and look at really hard things, you have to look for the joy as well. Oh, I mean, some people don't, but
Mm.
I think
Mm.
it's a sort of survival strategy, isn't it? But there's that, and I think the writing is a joy. You know, there's the satisfaction of putting words together. Perhaps that's what comes through. Is just, you know, in the enjoyment of the process.
Yes. I think what I'm saying is, it's not a
Yeah.
stoic poetry saying, well, you know, we have to, I guess we have to look for joy. It's really, it really is an abundantly, you know, there's sadness too, but it's open to experience, it's open to sensation, and it's generous. I like it a lot.
Thanks, Jacques. You are always generous in your feedback. I think you know, I've written, I think at least there's certainly been phases in my life where I've written Stoic poetry, but it's not poetry that I ever want to share with anyone because I think yeah, I think perhaps it's not true poetry. You know, I want what I write to be true to how I experience life, and I don't think I experience life in a stoic way. So
Well, thank you.
Great question and great conversation. I also wanted to ask Jean if you can put the link to the blog perhaps in the chat so people can access it.
Sure.
Okay.
It's I'll say it, I'll type it just now, but it's dawndrawn.blogspot.com.
Thank you.
I'll write it in there. Chat. And as I said, I haven't done much with it for a while now, but this is a good reminder to get back on it. So just going to check that I've got it right before I press send. Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
There was one other hand earlier. I don't know if they've changed their mind about asking a question.
I didn't see that hand. Okay.
Right. It hasn't appeared back again, so perhaps they changed their mind.
Okay. Well, Jean, thank you. Yeah. It's really good to hear your voice, the Wheelbarrow, and yeah, looking forward to seeing where you go with where your writing takes you. Yeah, it does feel like an
Thank you.
adventure each time. Good to hear you. Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. It's good to see you guys again.
It's
And thanks for the opportunity to read.
hey,